Good evening. Thanks so much for inviting us. I have my emergency glasses. I think I'll wear them. I scripted my remarks. Those of you who know me at a podium are probably grateful that I arrived with scripted remarks. On behalf of FAN, I'm grateful for this opportunity to address the New Trier Township Annual Town Meeting and wish to especially thank Clerk Jerome Hoynes, who put my name forward as tonight's keynote speaker. I met Mr. Hoynes last night at FAN's event featuring investigative journalist Sam Quinones, and I was moved to learn that over the years, he has arranged for groups of high school students to attend many FAN programs. I admire his commitment and his creativity and his efforts to engage students in a serious and sustained manner. Thank you very much for your service. I'd like to offer an overview of the recent transformation of FAN, especially since New Trier Township, its venues, schools, organizations, businesses, and residents has been at the core of FAN's work for decades. I myself am completing my 11th year with FAN. I first joined in the 2007-08 school year as a volunteer liaison from North Shore Country Day School, when my son was in second grade and he's now a high school junior. At that time, FAN was in its second decade of operation, and I was immediately impressed with how its leadership had created a broad network of school participation. I was also intrigued by its mission to bring together the community for learning and support. Those days, FAN events were held at New Trier's Northfield campus, midday in the boardroom, room C234, that holds about 125 people. The majority of the speakers were local experts offering their wisdom on a variety of topics ranging from adolescent risk behaviors to social aggression. Then, as now, the events were free and open to the public. By the time I joined as liaison, FAN was struggling to maintain its audience. My first year, FAN hosted 10 events and had a total head count of less than 400 people. FAN's leadership sought solutions, was even wondering if it was time to perhaps close up shop after all those years. Instead, they recruited new leaders, hoping to reinvigorate the offerings and boost audience. I was one of those recruited. In my second year with FAN, I took on 2 volunteer roles, programming chair and co-chair. The outgoing leadership not so gently suggested that I find myself a co-chair. I scanned the room, trying to determine who might be willing to work with me. This took some time. The decision was quite simple, really, and it remains the best decision of my tenure. I asked Susan Rooney, who you're honoring tonight, who was then a new FAN liaison from Sears School, to co-chair FAN with me. I took her to lunch, talked about the daunting task in front of FAN, described a few ideas I had, and told her that she was the perfect partner to get it all done. You have to understand, Susan Rooney was and is a very busy woman. At the time, she had 4 kids at home, was very involved in their schools and activities, and was also very committed to her work with her church and other philanthropic pursuits. Also, she didn't know me, and I didn't really know her. Here's what I had observed at the liaison council meetings, however. Susan was always prepared, attentive, enthusiastic, excited, optimistic, open to ideas, funny, and hardworking. I noticed that when I told jokes, she laughed. She just did it again. At that fateful lunch, Susan hesitated for only a moment and then said yes. I jumped up and hugged her, and we've been side by side with FAN ever since. Her kindness, her warmth, her faith in FAN and in me, her determination to bring FAN to the next level, her unwavering commitment to our mission, these qualities and behaviors have been at the very heart of our work. 10 years later, Susan and I remain a team. In a few moments, New Trier Township will be honoring Susan, who now serves as FAN's board president, with your George E. Noyes Community Spirit Award. Your wisdom is self-evident. Susan and I immediately set to work to rebuild and relaunch the FAN brand. For the first few years, we spent all of our time doing presentations all around New Trier Township about the, quote, new FAN and its offerings. We met with superintendents, principals, school social workers, nonprofit leaders, behavioral health clinicians, faith leaders, parent groups. Basically, as long as there was at least one other person present, we were preaching the FAN gospel. We set ourselves the task of rethinking and redesigning the FAN program logistics. The first and easiest decision was to move the bulk of the programs from midday to evenings so that working people could attend. We created after-school FAN events with content for educators, and we made sure to offer professional development credits at those events for free. We created programs for clinicians too, gathering in one room professionals from all across the area. This morning's Grand Rounds event with Sam Quinones on the topic of opioid epidemic is just the latest example of this outreach, with CEUs provided to professionals for free. We actively solicited liaisons from every school that funded us, and we made it mandatory to attend the monthly liaison council meetings. Then, as now, we never required a specific amount from a school PTO. We were always much more interested in building a grassroots structure of support. Currently, our liaison council numbers nearly 70 individuals who meet monthly, representing not just our school partners, but also our many nonprofit partner sponsors as well. I might note parenthetically, Bill Hansen, Family Service at Glencoe, comes to those meetings. I could point out other people, I'm not going to do that. We revised the design of our flyers and greatly expanded the number of locations where they were posted. Currently, we post in 650 locations all across New Trier and Evanston Townships. We focused on collaborations, all kinds, seeking organizations to partner on specific events, all with an eye to increasing headcount at the events. We have partnered with dozens and dozens of groups from all over the region, and we always welcome more. We also set ourselves the task of building our newsletter subscriber base. A decade ago, we had several hundred. As of last night, we have over 11,000. These are opt-in subscribers too. We don't buy mailing lists. People who ask to be on our list. One of the biggest challenges we faced was to increase attendance at the events. You can't really be a programming body if no one comes to your programs. In the early years of rebuilding FAN, we focused on having lots of event sponsors, and back then, we were more interested in the partnerships and the expanded audience base that they could bring, and less interested in holding out for money from sponsors. That will come later. Later did come, of course. A decade ago, FAN's primary source of funding was school PTOs and an annual grant from Kenilworth Union Church's Outreach Committee. Our annual budget back then was about $11,000. It was clear from the outset, at least to me, that school funding was not infinitely elastic. PTOs had plenty of important activities and initiatives to fund within their schools, and it was unrealistic to expect that those donations would increase in a significant way. Instead, we set to work on diversifying our funding, and today we enjoy strong support from corporations, family foundations, nonprofits, and individuals, which has made our extraordinary growth possible. Here's a remarkable statistic, one of the most significant about FAN's evolution. In the 2007-8 season, as I mentioned, we welcomed 380 guests at 10 events. Last year, 9 years later, we welcomed 26,000 guests at 53 public and private events. I've outlined the nuts and bolts, and I've left out loads of stuff for the sake of time about how we rebuilt FAN. The core of my argument, though, is this. None of this is made possible without carefully curating high-quality speakers and, perhaps most importantly, a fervent belief in the power of community. Now, I could do a second speech on how to pick speakers, the secret sauce. Tonight, I will leave it at this. I read constantly, books, magazines, online forums, academic research. We seek input continuously from fans' inner circle, the 8 members of our board of directors and the 13 members of our executive board, many of whom are sitting right here. Thank you so much for your service. We poll the fan liaisons for suggestions. We ask for recommendations from our audiences. We review lists provided to us by New York publishing houses about new books and authors on book tours. We do independent research. We ask our speakers for recommendations, naturally. We meet with school administrators and teachers and mental health providers. We ask our corporate and institutional sponsors for suggestions. And perhaps most frequently, people email me all the time, or stop me in the aisle of Whole Foods, or approach me at my gym, or wake me up from my lounge chair at the beach to offer an opinion and a suggestion. I have a list of potential speakers that numbers nearly 300 at this point. But that's another talk for another day. What's more important for tonight is this. FAN has 3 key words: connect, educate, inspire. All 3 are about relationships, about the importance of helping to alleviate loneliness and isolation, about offering compassion and concern and information. Many things happen at FAN events. Sometimes a speaker is brilliant, or even just great. Sometimes there's a great Q&A, sometimes not. There's always outstanding content. Sometimes there's a standing ovation. Each time, every single time, whether there's 2,000 people or 150, there is the creation of community. Individuals leaving their homes and schools and offices to gather together, free and open to the public. No barriers, no obstacles, to have a communal experience that many times extends into the following days and weeks and months. These are not events that feature aggressive argumentation or hostility. These are not events where one feels shamed about their personal and professional failures. These are events where knowledge is gained, inspiration is gleaned, and connection, which is another word for love, is made manifest. I'll end with 2 stories, not scripted. Danger zone approaching. A couple years ago, we hosted Andrew Solomon, brilliant writer, researcher, author. He actually came to us for a few years in a row. This particular speech was on the topic of depression, of which he is expert and a sufferer. There was some doubt at the time about, well, who's going to come here and talk about depression? That's a kind of a sad program. We worked very hard. We leveraged the FAN brand, and at New Church High School at their Winnetka campus, we welcomed about 1,300 people for a talk on depression. For those of you who do programming, those of you in the mental health field, you know that to have 1,300 people show up on a weekday night to hear a talk on depression is frankly nothing short of phenomenal. It simply doesn't happen. It's like some skewed line in space. It's not real. I walked out to go do my head count. I count at every program how many people are there. I know it's sort of weird, but I do. And I walked out back through the lobby, and there was one person standing in the lobby. It was Ginny Newkrantz, who, as many of you may know, is the founder of Erica's Lighthouse, founded upon the death of her daughter, Erica, from suicide. Erica's Lighthouse was a sponsor on the program, and Erica and Ginny was out in the hallway, and she was very emotional, all by herself, and I walked out and I approached her. I said, "Are you okay?" She looked at me and she grabbed my arm and she stared at me. She said, "If you would have told me that this many people would show up on a program about depression, I never would have believed it." And she kept saying, "Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you." Now that's not like the kind of metric that I can necessarily put in a spreadsheet. And when you want to know what's fans' impact in the community, where's your metrics? And I just gave you a bunch of numbers, I can give you more. That was a personal moment with someone who had suffered terribly, who had tried and hoped and does try and hope still to educate the community about something that is awful, the scourge of suicide and depression. To have that moment was extremely meaningful with her. That's one story. Second story I want to tell you is about when Fan, if I don't know if any of you watched 60 Minutes on Sunday night and you saw Oprah interview the glorious Bryan Stevenson about his new museums in Alabama, about lynching and slavery. Bryan Stevenson, we were so fortunate to host 2 years in a row for numerous public and private events. Bryan Stevenson spoke at North Shore Country Day for an event for their student population and their faculty, a private event. He was their Harold Hines visiting fellow that I helped help Bryan come there. After Bryan talked, if you had ever had the luxury and privilege of hearing Bryan talk, you know what I'm saying. He is one of those standing ovation speakers, people just crying after hearing him talk. It's profoundly moving. As he finished and he came down and we were heading to out of the auditorium, we were stopped by a group of students who wanted to just stop and have just a few minutes with him. There was a young man there who is a high school student, I later found out, sophomore. Tall, slight. Brian was next to me and the boy was next to him, the student, and I was distracted by someone asking me a question, and at one point I saw the corner of my eye that Brian had reached forward and was holding the boy's arm. And I turned and I looked and I kind of wanted to make sure that everything was okay, and the boy was sobbing. He was saying, he said, "You changed my life. You changed my life." This is not the kind of boy that you might have, I don't know, I don't want to jump on this. Okay, I won't, scratch that. I don't know what kind of boy he is. Brian, in reaching out to him, said, "This is the work. This is the work." And he was just sobbing. It was, the privilege I have to witness these things is extraordinary. Again, not something I can put in a spreadsheet and offer to a financial committee about anybody, any committee, any organization. You know, you should fund FAN because, I don't know how to put, and as you might imagine, not only me, but the other people who work with FAN, dozens of these kinds of stories. The impact is real, it's significant, it's continuous. Thank you for listening tonight. Thank you for attending FAN programs. And thank you for honoring FAN's true angel, Susan Rooney. Thank you.